But this is just a quick video to show how to install these Anderson power pole connectors onto the end of some wire. So first we'll start off by stripping the wire back. You've got to strip it back about 3/8 of an inch, and it's always a good idea to use some kind of an adjustable wire stripper like this one here, so that you don't nick the wire that you might be trying to do here. I'm going to probably have to do this off camera, because I may not be able to get enough room on camera here to do this, but I'm just rotating this around kind of gently as I squeeze the handles, and then we should be able to pull off that insulation there. Let's see. There we go. So we've got a nice strip there without taking any of the wires off. And then I usually like to also put a little bit of a twist on that. That helps keep all the strands together. So when we slip it into the contact there, it'll go in nice and cleanly. So let me strip the other one off here and we'll come back on video. Okay, with both the wires stripped and a little twist put in them, before we connect or slide on the contacts here and crimp them, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of orientation. These power pole connectors are nice. These little plastic shrouds have got some features that allow you to couple them together. You can see a little bit of an indentation or groove on this side. You can see a little protrusion, okay, on that side of them, and they look like just rectangular, slots, but really they're dovetails. And what that allows you to do is slide them together. So if we take, and let me see if I orient this the right way here, might be able to see. So if we orient the slot of this black one along with the protrusion on the red one here, we can slide them together, and you can see how they kind of stay together, and slide them together like that. And that kind of keeps them together. And you can kind of orient them a couple of different ways, but some of the amateur radio groups and emergency response groups have adopted this orientation, with the hoods kind of going over the top, the red one being on the left and the black one being on the right. And if you make all of your cable assemblies this way, whether you're hooking up to batteries or hooking up to radios, if you follow this same convention, it'll make it easier for you to connect up radios to power cords and things like that without having to worry about whether you've cross-polarized them. So with that orientation in mind, we'll use that when we put the terminals on the ends of the wire. So when these terminals slide into the back of the connectors, they kind of go in this orientation. You can see the connector here has got a little bit of a downturn on it. It slides into the back of the connector this way and really hooks over that little metal spring that you might be able to see just inside that connector. So when we go to put these then on the wires, we want to be sure that we're going to have that right orientation on the wires here as well. So on the black one, which is going to be our negative, we want to make sure that we put that one on that way and crimp it down that way. And then the red one will do the same thing. Make sure that those kind of hooks are pointing down. Okay, so just like that. So we'll crimp those on in that orientation, so that once they're crimped on and we slip them into the housing, they'll be in the right orientation. So let's go and talk about crimping. So when crimping those wires, you really want to have the right tool. There are lots of inexpensive crimping tools that are out there, and they'll have different profiles in terms of what the die look like or the ends look like that are going to actually do the crimp. And if you're just putting little ring terminals on wires and things like that, you can kind of use whatever you want. But for these power pole connections, it really does pay to get one of the crimping tools that is designed for it. Mainly because there's a pretty tight clearance inside that housing, and you want to be sure that you don't have to distort the terminal in any way to get it into that housing. So this one is Tri-Crimp by West Mountain Radio. It's a nice tool. There are different dies available for this, so you can put different dies in to do different types of terminals. So we'll use this to make that connection. It's a ratcheting type tool. So what will happen is as you crimp down, you can hear it ratcheting. Okay, and the idea is that what you'll do is you'll crimp it down until that latch finally releases. You can hear it like that, and then you can let go. The important thing is not to squeeze it past that point where the latch releases, because you could potentially break the die when you do that. So let's get ready to crimp one of those wires. It's kind of tough to do this on camera, but let's see if we can do this the right way. So I've got this oriented the right way, because this will slip into this housing, the correct orientation. And the way you use this connector, this here, this is a 30 amp connector, so that's going to go into the middle die here. And so we'll slip that in and then cramp down on it. So I'm going to pull the other wire up out of the way here. Okay. And position, see if I can do this so you can actually see it on camera here. It's kind of tough to watch two things at once. So I'm going to slip this inside here, okay, and then crimp down on that. And let me get both hands on here, okay, and we'll just watch that little lever down here. You'll actually see when it releases. Okay, so it just released, so now I'm fully crimped. We'll let this thing go. And now let's take a close look at that connection. You can actually see a really nice crimp to that, no bellowing out, a nice crimp at the back of it in there, and that's what a proper crimp should look like on these power pole terminals. But I've gone ahead and crimped the other terminal here, so both of these are now ready to go. Now let me bring up the topic of soldering. A lot of people will like to then also solder these connections in place to kind of solidify that even further. And there's two schools of thought there. The one school of thought obviously is that a soldered connection here is going to be solid. It's going to be much less likely to loosen up and that kind of thing. So a nice thing to do. And there's some good reasons for soldering, and I will sometimes do that. But the other school of thought is when you solder, the solder will wick down into kind of the stranded conductors here, and then where the solder ends, you wind up creating kind of a bending point, because the soldered wire will be very stiff, the stranded wire won't be. And as a result, you'll get a point there that if any stress that gets put on this terminal is going to create like a fracture line, or could potentially create a fracture right where the solder ends. Crimp connections, when they're done properly, are very reliable, so I'll oftentimes not solder them. If I'm going to go into a situation where I know the wires are never going to be bent or dressed or things like that, I'll solder them sometimes. But for what I'm doing here, just the crimp connection is going to be enough. So let's take care of inserting these into the plastic housings. Okay, these are ready to go inside the plastic housing with the curves kind of pointing down. We'll take the housings in this orientation like this with the hood over the top, and we can slip both of these in here, and you push them until you hear them click. And sometimes it can take quite a bit of force, especially if you're doing two at once. Sometimes I'll put a little screwdriver in the back. I just heard the red one click in there, so now I just have to get the black one oriented right and get that one in place. And let's see, I might have to kind of play with this a little bit to kind of get that in place. And we'll just do that off. Oh, there it goes. And push that in place, and now that clicked in place. So now both of those are in there. They're not going to come out, and we've now completed the power pole connection. Now there is a little hole here. Some of the suppliers will give you a little roll pin you can stick in there to try to keep these from potentially sliding apart. But I've never had a problem with them sliding apart, so I typically don't put those roll pins in. To me, it's just an extra piece of metal that might fall out at some point and short things out, so I leave the roll pins out. Some people will also backfill with some hot melt glue or some caulk or things like that to create a little bit of a strain relief where the wires go in. And that's probably a pretty good idea, especially if you solder the connections. If you don't solder them, it's probably unnecessary. So I hope you found this video useful to see how to assemble these power pole connectors. Again, really convenient, nice, reliable connectors to use on portable electronic equipment. Thanks again for watching.